Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. Today, I'm just going to concentrate on the betrayal of a loved one, like a partner, either your boyfriend or your partner or your husband or wife. And this betrayal is really separate in some ways to the others because it has a lot more impact, I think, especially if you're living together. The family betrayal, friends, work, those sort of betrayals, you're not usually living with the person. And so it's a little bit easier, but this one it's going to really impact. The first thing is that I want to say to you that I'm really sorry this happened to you. It's really dreadful. And from that moment on, the whole relationship and your feelings towards that person are going to be different. You're not to feel bad about that, as I've said before. They created it, you didn't. And as much as they'll like to pretend you created it because it was your fault, if they didn't want to betray you, particularly in terms of an affair, they just had to come and talk to you about this. And you could have gone to counselling, and they didn't do that. They just went off and were selfish and looked after their own personal needs. And don't lose sight of that. While they were with somebody else, they weren't thinking about you. They might have guilt and shame to a degree, and we hope they do, really. But most of them don't have much of a conscience, I think. But you need to look after yourself and do what's right for you. If you don't want to have them near you, if you don't want them to touch you, if you don't want them in the room with you, if you can't bear looking at them, it's okay. They created it. And that might pass, but initially you actually might feel like that. The trouble you're going to have is what you're going to do. And not all of us can get over it. Not all of us are able to forgive and not forget, but forgive and go on. And initially at the beginning, you will not feel like you can. There'll just be too much emotion, and this emotion will actually be at the forefront of your mind. It will be hard for you to concentrate. Remember that once this happened to you, go kind of into like a zone where everything else is happening and you're doing the dishes and doing the shopping and you're at work, but a whole part of you is just not present. And that's quite normal. Get lots of help now. If you need to go to your doctor, get some counselling. If you've got, as I said, good family or friends, you can talk to people you actually trust. Do that. But don't be too much on your own with this. Sometimes you need somebody else's reflection on things to help you, particularly if they have your best interests at heart. So now your marriage or partnership relationship is not the same. There was someone else in that relationship now with you. Perhaps there were other people that you didn't even know about and you found out about that as well. So all of a sudden it's not just the two of you, it might be the 3 or 7 of you. And this is going to change the whole foundation of the relationship. And basically you now don't trust them anymore. Now this distrust you have is going to have long-term effects. Because you don't trust them, you don't know what to believe and what not to believe, and your radar with this is really going to be bad for a while. I wouldn't really believe much of what's being told to me unless there's some kind of proof, because people will make up stories. I mean, it can take you a week to 2 weeks to be like the KGB and get the truth out of them. That's how bad it can be for you. And I think you've got to work out if you're a person who needs to know all the details. If you need to, and you have to sort of thrash it out, well, so be it. And if they don't want to comply or help you, well, that's just going to wreck it even more. If you're a person who it's all right with the short version, you don't want the details, that can work as well. You have to work out who you are. The trouble is that now you don't trust them. So when they go out or when they're going to be late, you've decided to stay together and sort of try and wing it for a while, you're going to not trust their word. And that's the worst thing that you have now. If you can come to some kind of arrangement where you stay together, perhaps you have children and you just want to see how you can work it out for a while, do that. But really the other person just has to tell you the truth now, the total truth. You might get better at working out when they're lying now. Perhaps before you suspected it, but you were just told other things, but now you know you were probably right. So don't think that your radar's wrong or your gut's wrong. You probably had a gut feeling about things and asked or queried and then you were lied to. or they have withheld information from you. But now you need to really trust that to quite a high degree. If you're a person who can move on from it, get over it, and not have lingering anger, resent, hurt, anxiety, and fear, you can do that. There's not many of us out there who probably could do that. But if there's a lot of good things going on and you have a lot of love in your relationship and you think the person can be forgiven and it was a stupid mistake, then try it. Remember, nothing's set in concrete, so if you decide to try it and then you feel like you just can't, well, that's fine. In my case, I just couldn't really bear that person to be near me, and I didn't want to touch them because they'd been with somebody else. So that's me, but you might not be like that, and I'm being very honest there. So for me, he got sick very soon after I found out. When I found he was sick, I found out actually. So then he died of cancer 47 days later or something. So it wasn't really a thing I had to handle long term. But I know that feeling that it's like, eek, I don't know where you've been. And I had that feeling, and you might have that feeling too. Because that's the other thing too. If they've been with other people, you can be worried about catching something that they got from somebody else, and that's kind of a valid thing as well. The relationship has now been completely decimated and crushed and broken, as it was. You can decide whether you want to just call it quits, or have a separation, or stay there and try to see if you can mend it. It's really a personal decision. It has a lot to do with how much you love them and how much history you have. It also has a lot to do with your situation. It's easier to leave when there's only two of you. However, if you now have a family of 5 and the children are going through a lot of stuff, maybe they're going through exams in high school that are important, you might want to just give it a try and see if you can get over it. I'm not sure whether people ever really get over it, if I'm really honest with you. I think there's always that lingering feeling there that it sits in the back of your mind. I've spoken to people who've stayed and they always came to the conclusion they just kind of learnt to live with it, and they did it because they just did it, and they never kind of felt the same, and the magic was never quite there. It was that little bit of thing where people say, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Because to be totally in love with someone is to be completely vulnerable with them and to trust them completely that they won't hurt you. And because this person has hurt you so much and hurt you so deeply, you don't have that now. Some people can rectify it, the one who's done it, the betrayer, by changing how they do things and really make a big love change in the relationship. And actually you could fall in love more deeply again. I think that's actually rare, but it does happen. So don't think you can't do that. And if you are a person who is quite forgiving and you love that person unconditionally, you can probably get through this if you want to. The whole thing is that they've done it, it can be forgiven, but they can't do it again. And they really have to be completely honest with you all the time. So if you're having a skitsy moment and still, worried about why they're late and where they were, they can't be evasive with you and be making excuses. They have to be really clear with you and really honest with you. And you need to learn to read their face and read the signs. Any kind of shiftiness or think their eyes are supposed to move a lot or something, or they move their head a certain way, you can go and Google it. There's signs when people are lying to you. You need to learn those so you can keep yourself safe. It is something that can be saved. It just all depends if it was just one incident or you find out about many others. And it also depends on what you want to do. In the end, you're the one who has all the power. And I want you to remember that. You have all the power. They might have decimated and wrecked the marriage or the relationship, but you're the one who has the power because you get to choose whether I want to be with you now. It's not the other way around. They don't get that choice. They lost it when they betrayed you and lost your trust. They lost that choice. What they want isn't really important anymore because they messed it up. and they broke it, and they broke your heart in millions of pieces, and you're trying to mend. So while you're trying to mend, you have all the power in a funny way. You will feel powerless and helpless, and your self-esteem will be low, and you'll be doubting about your attractiveness. But just let me tell you one thing. People who betray other people don't do it because they've got a better figure or they look better or they're more good looking. You could be the most fabulous looking person, a model. I know someone who every man in the room just thought she was wonderful. She was slender, she had a lovely figure, beautiful looking girl, lovely personality, just like a model, always looked immaculate. And he betrayed her countless times, and she just learnt to live with it and put up with it. It's not about that. They always want someone else, and these people lack personal self-esteem. They want somebody else to tell them how good they are. You could be telling them for years that, and I'll meet some person at work who runs around and preens herself in front of them or himself and tells them how wonderful they are, and they hear that. These people who betray usually have no real confidence in themselves and very low self-esteem. They're sort of like just big puffed up pigeons, and underneath all that they need to get that from other people. So it doesn't matter what you look like, all right? Forget that one. This isn't about how you look. It's about them feeding their own ego. They have to feed their ego, and as a partner you can do so much, but these sort of people will use other people to feed their ego, and they're very, very easily manipulated by the opposite sex. So I want you to remember that. This is their ego. And you might be a person who doesn't have a lot of ego, but I think your person who's betrayed you has a lot of ego. And ego doesn't mean you have good self-esteem. I think people who have a lot of ego don't have any self-esteem. That's why they have ego. So I'm going to leave you with those thoughts today. You will get through this. You can get through this. You can be happier, and you can know that in the end you will be stronger for this, and if anyone comes to you with a similar problem, you will help them through it. Everything bad that happens to us, there's lessons to be learned, and we can become more compassionate and loving people and understand life even more. But don't make any decisions until you want to, and you can change your mind at any time. If you decide one thing and then later on you think, I can't do this, or I want to go back to him or her, you can do that. Do not make black and white decisions right now because you're in too much of a mess. And also the other person really has to prove themselves to you now. And that's not up to you to do, that's up to them. So let them do their darndest if they want to, but make sure that in the end, if you don't have the trust, if they won't tell you the truth, you're going to be living in that same area for the rest of your life with them. And if truth is important to you, then in the end, that's the thing that's going to make the difference. It's not really about what they did. It's about the fact they lied to you and deceived you. I think people keep getting hooked onto what they did, or obviously that wasn't good. But they could have betrayed you by stealing all the money in your joint account. We're talking a little bit more about affairs here, but there's other sorts of betrayals. They could have sold your car and not told you. All these different sorts of things that people will betray you, or if you're working in business together, could have betrayed you there. So it's about the trust. And if you ultimately can't trust them, your relationship will always be on rocky ground, because love and trust go together. So think about these things. Don't be manipulated. Don't be guilted, blamed, none of those things. And go and do some reading about what other people have done. There's a lot of stuff on the internet too. And get some good counselling if you want to or you need to. Okay, I'll leave it with you for this week, and I'll be uploading more of the podcasts on different parts of betrayal as we move along. So I'm sending you lots of love and lots of healing, because this is really difficult stuff.